Let's return to our main story. Let's talk about the new Trump world order after a blizzard of executive orders through this first week. With us is Miloon Kothari, previous Special Rapporteur on Human Rights for the UN in Delhi, and Fred Fleitz is a former CIA analyst in Washington. Thanks both of you for being here with us on the programme. Both of you, a brief snapshot of what you've seen and heard in this first week. Miloon, first of all, to you.
Well, yeah, thanks. It's good to be here. From a human rights, social justice, and environmental justice perspective, Donald Trump's rhetoric and actions since he became president are a grave travesty. I think we are living in a world with deep divisions that call for global leaders who can heal, who can show solidarity, respect justice and equality, non-discrimination. But everything we've seen and what Trump has done in his first 10 days has been consistent with his campaign rhetoric, showing vengeance, disrespect, intolerance, very divisive, xenophobic, very prejudiced. So I think it's a very, very serious danger to the world to have
a very bleak assessment,
a world leader.
A very bleak assessment. Fred, your assessment?
Well, I take a different position. I think it's a promising first week. I don't deny that there were some missteps, but I think when we hear Mr. Trump talking about America first, we know that does not mean America is going to withdraw from the world. Churchill's bust is back in the Oval Office. The UK is first in line for new trade deals. Theresa May will meet with Mr. Trump this week. Trump will have stronger relations with Japan, with Israel. He will repair relations with Israel. I think that the trend line is very positive.
Miloon, you touched upon it, but those comments overnight on torture, on waterboarding, how alarmed does that make you?
Well, very, very alarmed, because, all the scientific evidence from around the world shows that torture does not work. The countries have been moving away from that. In fact, it's very good to hear that Theresa May be carrying that message to Donald Trump. It's not only torture. I think it's also the voices we have heard from the Trump administration about withdrawing from global bodies, particularly the United Nations, and the body that upholds human rights and international agreements, and withdrawing funding, perhaps reconsidering some of the treaties that the United States has signed. So that doesn't bode very well for the world, and I don't see...
Well, Fred Fleitz, address that point, because there was that draft executive order where they're talking about looking at the contributions they make to international bodies, the burdensome nature of the UN. How does that make the US stronger, which is, I know, something that you have said?
I'll talk about that, but first let me say, the Trump administration is not going to torture anyone. Torture is illegal, it's immoral, it's against U.S. law. Trump made clear he's not going to do this. Trump was referring to enhanced interrogation. There's a debate in the U.S. whether this is torture or not, but it doesn't matter, it's illegal. Trump isn't going to do it. The CIA director, the defense secretary said they will not do it. This is off the table, so I don't think this is a real news story. Concerning the United Nations, there is concern in the United States that the UN has become very radical, and there has to be an assessment of whether certain UN programs are advancing international security and American interests.
Miloon, you were trying to get in there.
Yeah, I was saying that, his support for torture, for waterboarding, was very clearly stated in his interview yesterday with NBC News. And also, it's not only a question of course, we can talk about rationalizing UN expenditure, but the talk now is about, from the Trump administration, is about withdrawing funding from humanitarian aid, from peacekeeping, which goes completely contrary to U.S. positions until now, which are trying to heal fragmented states, which are trying to reduce extremism. And what we are hearing is exactly the opposite of that. So it's a very contradictory policy where Trump says, well, we are going after terrorism, but then you're withdrawing support that is very badly needed around the world.
Let Fred Fleitz address that point.
There are UN refugee programs that are not allowing Christian refugees into them. They're not being well run. This is the example of the kind of thing that has to be fixed. If we're going to have, first of all, I think we should let refugees of all countries come into the United States as long as we can address the terrorist concern. But it concerns me that when Christian refugees try to come to countries try to come out of countries like Syria and they can't get into the UN refugee camps, there is a problem. This is among the problems that Mr. Trump's going to try to address.
Let me move it on, because I want to show our viewers one of the latest tweets from Donald Trump, because he was talking about the wall and the spat with Mexico's president in terms of who pays, and there it is. If Mexico is unwilling to pay, he then goes on to talk about, well, perhaps we'll cancel the meeting with the president that's due for next week. I mean, Fred Freitz, is that how international relations are now going to work? America first, and if not, well, not even a meeting?
The southern border is a serious issue in the United States. It was a serious issue for Trump's supporters. I think we need strong relations between the U.S. and Mexico. This issue will be addressed. I sort of regret that we've had these missteps early on, but I think it'll be addressed.
Miloon, you're sitting there in a foreign capital. What does it feel like when you hear that drumbeat, as you heard in the inauguration of America First? What does it feel like from that perspective?
It's very scary. I think there's this fear-mongering in the world. There's a great deal of insecurity amongst people here in India and elsewhere about what Trump is actually going to do. You know, to refuse to meet a world leader, I think it sort of reeks of vengeance. I think there are values that he's projecting which are, you know, he's a terrible role model for people around the world. So I don't see, I think that one of the main problems with Mr. Trump is that he does not put a premium on truth. He peddles lies. You know, there's just so much going on which is completely contrary to what one would expect from a world leader.
Fred Freitz, I could see you looking, shaking your head there. Just respond to that, peddling lies. I mean, the New York Times this week had that on its front page, lies. I mean, virtually every day there is a story where actually what has been said, either by the Trump team or his spokesman, is being questioned.
I sort of wonder how international audiences can know anything at all about Mr. Trump that is the truth, given the lies that are being peddled by the New York Times and CNN. I mean, there's no positive news about him coming out at all. A lot of the things that Mr. Trump is doing is extremely popular, such as building oil pipelines that the Obama administration blocked for no reason except for environmental complaints. There really are no environmental concerns for these pipelines. I think Mr. Trump has tapped into a feeling by a large number of the American people that they've been left behind in some of the things that have been agreed to by the Obama administration. I think he's scoring a lot of points at home for what he did this week.
Miloon,
I think let's talk about the pipelines. I think one of them is the Keystone, which after tremendous struggle by the Native Americans in the U.S. was, one part of it was canceled by the Obama administration. I think the signal from the Trump administration is that we are going back to a fossil fuel-led world. And, you know, there's been tremendous progress in negotiations in Paris about the climate agreement. That's all being denied. So I don't see, I think he's taking us back to a time, I don't know, decades ago. And so there is incredible regression. I don't see the support for a pipeline as a positive step at all.
Okay, listen, we are
because
out of time, so
let
me ask you both, if you can do it in one sentence, I'd be grateful. Where do you think, a couple of years down this presidential track, we are going to be? Fred Freitz, first of you.
I think we'll see a stronger and more credible America, and hopefully a much safer world.
Miloon, a final word from you.
Well, I think if Donald Trump continues, we'll see a deeply divided world and a deeply divided United States, and the prognosis is not very good at all.
Well, I asked if you could both do it in a couple of sentences. You both have. Miloon Kothari and Fred Freitz, thank you so much for joining us here and debating that here on the programme. I was showing you pictures a short